Have you ever opened your laptop, stared at the blank page for a few moments, and then quietly closed your laptop because you've convinced yourself you don't have enough time to make any real progress? Maybe you've thought, what's the point of writing one more page today? Or, I'll wait until I have a whole afternoon to write. Or maybe you've thought, I'll start fresh on Monday. If you've ever felt that way, I want to gently challenge that thought. Because what if writing one more page today wasn't a tiny accomplishment at all? What if writing that single page became the beginning of the book that you've always dreamed of publishing? What if 1 year from today, your life looked completely different? Not because you suddenly found more time or became a better writer overnight, but because you simply kept writing one page at a time. So today I want to encourage you with something that completely changed the way I think about writing. Because books aren't written in giant leaps. They're written one page, one scene, one chapter, one word at a time. In case we haven't met, I'm Lorna Faith, and I help beginning sweet romance writers and other beginning fiction writers learn how to write stories inspired from what I've learned writing and self-publishing my own books. My hope is that the novels that you write leave readers smiling long after they've turned the last page. Whether you're still dreaming about your very first novel or you're halfway through a manuscript that's been sitting on your computer for months, my hope is that this video really encourages you to keep going. Because I honestly believe there are readers out there who need stories filled with hope, forgiveness, kindness, and second chances. And maybe, just maybe, the story that they are waiting for is yours. So here's something that I wish someone had told me about writing years ago. When I first dreamed about becoming an author, I imagined that real authors had these huge blocks of uninterrupted time. I pictured them sitting in a wonderful corner office with lots of windows and lots of coffee on hand and just writing away all day long on their books. And I thought someday maybe my life would somehow become less busy and I'd finally sit down to write my books. But the thing is for me, life didn't slow down. And there was always family responsibilities with my husband and taking care of my kids, my laundry, my groceries, different appointments, and the ordinary routines that filled up every week. And because I was waiting for the perfect writing day, I wasn't really making a lot of progress on writing my books. Have you ever done that? You wait until tomorrow because tomorrow will somehow be easier. Except tomorrow becomes next week. At least that's what I experienced. And next week becomes next month. And before you know it, another year has passed. The dream inside of you to write that book is still alive, but the manuscript doesn't have any more words on it. And one day I just realized something. The writers that I admired weren't necessarily writing for 8 hours every day. Many of them were simply protecting small pockets of time. Sometimes it was only 20 minutes, sometimes 30, sometimes just enough to write one more page. And that realization started to change my perspective because writing one page didn't feel impossible. Writing one page didn't mean that I had to have perfect inspiration. And writing one page didn't mean that I needed to have a whole afternoon booked off to write. All it meant was that I could begin. And something amazing happens when you just allow yourself to start, even if all you have is a little bit of time. Sometimes one page becomes 2 pages. One scene becomes another, and momentum starts to replace the fear you have of writing. And your confidence grows because you've kept a promise to yourself to write that one page today. This is really important to try to keep the promises that you've made to yourself. I still remember the days when I didn't feel like writing at all, days when every sentence felt weird and I was sure I was doing it badly, many days when I wondered if anyone would ever enjoy my stories. But as it turns out, every page that I finished became another brick in the foundation of a completed novel. And looking back now, I'm so grateful that I didn't wait until I was confident. Because the truth is that confidence came because I just continued to show up and to write that next sentence and then to write that next scene and that page. I tried to show up consistently to write. Maybe that's the encouragement that you are needing today. You don't need to become a different person before you can write your book. You simply need to write today's page. Here's something that might help to break it down even more. Let's do some simple math together. Now, math is not my strong suit, but this is pretty simple. Imagine that you just write one page every day. That's it, just one page. And some days maybe you write more, some days maybe less. But your goal is simply one page a day. After 1 week, you've written 7 pages. After 1 month, you've written 30 pages. After about 6 months, you've probably approaching the length of many novellas. After 1 year, you could easily have written well over 300 pages. And that's an entire novel. Not because you wrote thousands of words in one weekend, but because you kept choosing to write today's page. And I think maybe sometimes, I know this is true of me, we can often underestimate what being a consistent writer can accomplish. We're impressed by dramatic overnight success stories, but readers never see the hundreds of ordinary writing days behind every finished novel. And every published author has written pages that weren't very good. And every published author has doubted themselves. Every published author has stared at the blank page, wondering what should happen next. And the difference between those that finish the books and those that don't isn't perfection. It's really persistence and just staying steady. Writing one page might not seem like much today, but one page repeated hundreds of times becomes a finished manuscript. And a finished manuscript can become a published novel. A published book can find readers, and those readers might just tell their friends about your book. And they might even leave encouraging reviews. And your writing career has begun because of one page. It wasn't a giant leap, it was just simply one page that you wrote today. Let me show you what I mean with a sweet romance book example. Imagine we are writing the story of Jack and Emily. This is the story that I'm still in the process of creating. It's a sweet romance with a bit of mystery and suspense. But Jack is a former Navy SEAL who has returned to the beautiful seaside town of Angels Cove. From the outside, he looks strong and capable. But on the inside, Jack is carrying deep guilt over losing his fiancée, the woman that he loved years ago. And he's convinced that everyone he cares about eventually gets hurt. Emily arrives at the small seaside town of Angels Cove, hoping for a fresh start. She's kind, she's thoughtful, she's hardworking, but she's also afraid to trust again because life has taught her that people she loves don't always stay. In fact, she's often been abandoned. So now imagine that you're sitting down to write their story, and you don't need to figure out every chapter today. You don't have to solve every plot twist today. You don't even have to know how they eventually fall in love. But today is your writing day, and maybe you're simply writing the moment that Emily first walks into the little coffee shop that is overlooking the harbor. Maybe she's balancing 2 boxes while trying to push open the door. And maybe Jack reaches over to help before the boxes tumble onto the floor, and their eyes meet, and they exchange an awkward smile. Maybe this is only a few pages of writing, and that's all. But tomorrow, maybe you'll write their second conversation, and the next day, perhaps you'll write about the town festival where they accidentally end up volunteering together. A few days later, maybe you write that quiet scene where Jack begins to realize that Emily makes him feel safe enough to laugh again. And then you keep writing another page and another page after that. Eventually, those small scenes become chapters, and those chapters become a novel. Readers won't remember how quickly you wrote it, but they will remember how your story made them feel. It all started with one ordinary writing day when you chose to begin to write instead of waiting. I really want to share 5 powerful tips that I've learned about writing one page at a time. These ideas have helped me to finish writing my own books, and I hope they'll encourage you too to keep moving forward, even on the days when writing does feel hard. So let's talk about how one small writing habit can transform not just the novel that you are writing, but your confidence as a writer. Now that we've talked about why writing one page matters, let's get practical. Because some of you might be thinking, Lorna, I understand the idea, but I still get stuck. Maybe you don't know what scene to write next. Maybe you're worried that the scene won't be quite good enough. Or maybe you're simply exhausted after a long day, and the last thing you feel like doing is opening up your laptop and starting to write on your manuscript. I've been there. So today I want to share with you 5 tips that have helped me to keep writing even on days when I don't feel very inspired to write. And with each of these ideas, we'll visit Jack and Emily's story again to see how these ideas work in a real sweet romance. So tip number 1, don't write the whole book today. Simply write one scene. One of the biggest mistakes that beginning writers, and myself included, make is trying to carry the entire novel in their heads. And I am a big one for trying to carry everything in my head instead of writing it down. Thinking about chapter 20 before they've finished chapter 3, that's definitely me. Sometimes we can be worried about the ending before we've even introduced the hero. That kind of thinking is quite exhausting. Instead, ask yourself one simple question. What is the next moment my characters need to experience? Not the whole story, just the next moment. Imagine that Jack has just helped Emily carry those boxes into the coffee shop. Instead of worrying about their happily ever after, maybe today you simply write the conversation that they're having. Emily notices that Jack always seems to choose the corner table, facing the harbor. She asks if he's waiting for someone. Jack pauses, he smiles politely, and he says, "No, I just like the view." Emily doesn't know that he's looking toward the place where he lost someone years ago. And so maybe that's one scene. You don't need to solve the emotional wounds of your characters today. You simply let readers become curious, and small scenes build emotional momentum. Here's a simple way to shift our thinking as writers. Instead of asking, when will I finish this book? Maybe instead ask yourself, what is the next scene? That tiny shift makes writing feel much less overwhelming. Something to try. Before you stop writing each day, jot down one sentence that describes tomorrow's scene. And when you return tomorrow, you won't be facing a blank page. You'll already know where to begin. This is something that has really, really helped me, is I'll always jot down a sentence or two of where I think that the story is headed in the next scene before I end the day's writing. Tip number 2, let your characters surprise you. Beginning writers often believe that they need every chapter planned perfectly before they can write their story. Sometimes that works, but I think sometimes it doesn't, because one of the joys of writing fiction is discovering little moments that you never planned. Now, if you are a plotter, then that's great. I'm glad that that works for you. I'm kind of an in-betweener. I sketch out a possible outline, but to be honest, I sometimes have to sort of revamp it after I've written 3 chapters. And so I'm more of a discovery writer, I would say, than an outliner. But it's true. I think one of the joys of fiction writing is that there are little moments we discover along the way. It makes writing a novel very exciting. So let's go back to our Jack and Emily example. Maybe if you've written an outline, it says, Jack helps Emily repair her fence. But while writing, maybe Emily's dog escapes, and you didn't plan that, but it just happened. Maybe Jack has to chase the dog through the neighborhood. Children begin laughing. Maybe the elderly neighbor cheers them on from her porch. Suddenly, Jack laughs harder than he has in years. And you didn't plan that, but now you've learned something important about Jack. He's beginning to heal. And those little surprises often become readers' favorite moments in your story. So here's a different way maybe to think about that. Your outline is simply a guide. It isn't set in stone. Try to leave room for discovery. And here's something to try. When writing your next scene, ask yourself, what unexpected thing could happen that reveals more about my characters? Maybe it's not a huge plot twist, but maybe it's just something that's wonderfully human about one of your characters. Tip number 3, progress creates confidence. I hear beginning writers say this all the time. I'll write when I feel more confident. But confidence usually comes after progress, not before it. So back to our Jack and Emily story. Imagine Emily is opening her new flower shop. She doesn't know every customer, and she isn't sure the business will succeed. If she waited until she felt completely confident, the doors would never open. Instead, Emily unlocks the shop anyway. Writing works exactly the same way. Jack doesn't become brave because fear disappears. He becomes brave because he chooses to move forward despite his fears. And in some ways, we as writers aren't that different from our characters in that way. So here's a different way to think about it. Instead of waiting to feel like a writer, writing is really the action step that makes you feel confident as a writer. Here's something to try. Celebrate every page that you write. Not every chapter, not every finished novel, just every page. And those really are the small victories that matter and will really encourage you. Tip number 4, readers remember feelings more than they remember 50-cent words. And this really changed the way I write. Beginning writers often worry about beautiful descriptions, perfect dialogue, brilliant metaphors. I certainly did. And that's why I kept rewriting the first few chapters in those books I first wrote. I kept writing at least 10 times, and probably more, but I kept writing that first chapter. But worrying about perfect dialogue and the brilliant metaphors, I'm sure they have their place, but readers stay up late because they care about the characters in your story. So imagine this scene from Jack and Emily's story. Jack and Emily are helping to decorate the town square for the Christmas festival. Emily reaches for the top of the ladder and she loses her balance. Jack catches her before she falls. Neither of them says anything for a moment. Jack's hands are shaking slightly, not because she almost fell, but because he remembers another moment years earlier when he couldn't save someone that he loved. Emily notices his shaking hands, and she quietly places her hand over his and says, "I've got you." Nothing dramatic happens. There's no kiss, no declaration of love, but readers feel something in that moment as they read that. And that emotional connection is what they'll remember. Here's a way to think of it maybe a little differently. I want to encourage you that instead of trying to impress your readers, that you try to move them emotionally. Here's something to try. When writing your next scene, ask yourself, what emotion do I want readers to experience in this scene? Do I want them to feel hope, or laughter, or tenderness, or relief? Write toward that feeling that you want them to experience. Tip number 5, finished books change lives. Unfinished books can't. Perhaps this is the most important tip of all. Every writer has unfinished stories. I know I have a lot of them on my computer. Folders full of ideas, half-written chapters, characters we once loved. But readers can't experience stories that never get finished. Back to Jack and Emily's example. Imagine if I stopped writing Jack and Emily's story halfway through. Readers would never see Jack forgive himself. They would never get the chance to watch Emily learn to trust again. And they'd never experience that beautiful ending where two wounded hearts discover that love is stronger than fear. Those scenes only exist when the writer continues to write, one page at a time. Not every writing day will be exciting, and some days are quite difficult. Some days are going to need rewriting. I've done that a lot already. But the story will reach readers because it was finished. And that's really my hope for you. Not perfection, but a completed novel. So a different way to think about this maybe is your first draft is not your final draft. Its only job is to exist. Here's something for you to try. The next time you're tempted to edit yesterday's chapter instead of writing today's page, just pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and then ask yourself, would the future me rather have one polished chapter or a finished novel? And most of the time, the finished novel is probably what we'll choose. So let's just quickly summarize those 5 tips. Write one scene, not the whole book. Leave room for your characters to surprise you. Let progress build your confidence. Write for your readers' hearts and really make them feel something in your story. And above all, keep writing toward the end of your story. Because every page you write today is carrying your story closer to the readers who need to read it. So before we finish today, I want to speak to the writer who might be watching this video with a lump in their throat. Maybe you've started 3 novels and maybe you've abandoned a few of them. Maybe your manuscript has been sitting untouched for months, maybe even years. Perhaps every time you think about writing again, you hear that little voice in your head that says, you're probably never going to finish that story. Or, there are already so many books like yours, why bother? Or sometimes maybe the hardest one of all, I'm just not talented enough. I'm not good enough to be a writer, so why even try? And if that's how you're feeling today, I'd love to just talk to you just for a few more minutes because I want to remind you of something I believe with all my heart. Your dream isn't over. Your story isn't finished simply because you've stopped writing for a while. Your characters are still waiting, your ideas have not disappeared, and your imagination hasn't left you. You've simply paused. And there's really a wonderful difference between quitting and pausing. A paused story can begin again today. Sometimes we imagine successful authors never struggle, but every writer has difficult seasons. Every writer has chapters that they don't like, and every writer has moments when they wonder if anyone will ever read their book. The difference isn't that successful writers never feel discouraged. It's that they eventually decide to begin again. And maybe writing today's page is your beginning again. So now let's just go back to Jack and Emily's story example for a minute. Let's imagine something. Suppose I stopped writing Jack and Emily's story halfway through. Jack is still carrying the guilt of losing his fiancée years ago. Emily still believes that opening her heart means risking another painful goodbye. The coffee shop conversations have happened. The Christmas festival is over. They've shared quiet smiles and vulnerable moments. But the story ends there, and they never learn to trust. And Jack never forgives himself. And Emily never discovers that love is worth risking again. The final chapter is never written. And as readers, we would feel disappointed because we instinctively know that these characters really deserve more. And here's something that's really interesting. Sometimes we do exactly the same things to ourselves. We stop halfway through our own stories, not because we don't have the ability to finish, but because we've started to believe the lie that our story isn't worth completing. So I want to encourage you. Don't let fear write the ending of your novel. You get to write the ending, one page at a time. There really is a ripple effect to finishing your book. Let's imagine a different future. Perhaps a year from today, or even less time, you finish your manuscript. You type those two beautiful words, the end. You smile, maybe you even cry a little, because you've done something that you've dreamed about doing for years. And that's only the beginning. You revise your story, you learn about self publishing, you choose a cover, and you upload your book for readers to buy. And then one day, someone you've never met downloads your book. She curls up on the couch after a long week, and your story makes her laugh. It reminds her that kindness still matters, and it gives her hope. And maybe she recommends your book to her sister. Her sister tells a friend, and someone leaves a thoughtful review that says, "This story is exactly what I needed to read today." Maybe another reader has gone through heartbreak. Maybe another reader has been caring for their aging parents. Maybe someone else simply needed a reminder that second chances are possible. You've probably never met any of these readers, but your words become part of their lives. And none of that happens unless you finish writing your book. That's really the ripple effect. One page becomes one chapter becomes one novel. One novel touches one reader, and that reader tells another reader. And suddenly, something that began very quietly at your kitchen table starts to spread hope farther than you've ever imagined. So I encourage you, never underestimate what writing one page a day, one faithful step taken consistently can do for you. You don't have to finish today. Here's something that has helped me over the years. When I sit down to write, I don't tell myself, finish the novel today. That's far too much. I would feel very overwhelmed if I thought like that. Instead, I simply ask, can I write one honest page today? And most days the answer is yes. Some days that page turns into 3 pages because I'm kind of in the flow of the story. Some days it turns into 5 pages, and some days it only is 1 page. But that's totally fine because 1 page is still progress, and small progress repeated over time really does create wonderful results. Think about your favorite authors that you like to read. Every one of them reached the end of their story exactly the same way. 1 sentence, 1 paragraph, 1 page, 1 chapter at a time. There isn't a secret shortcut. There's simply the decision to keep going, to keep writing. So I would love to leave you with a little challenge this week. For the next 7 days, forget about word count goals, forget about finishing your novel, and forget about comparing yourself to anyone else that's writing. Instead, make one simple promise to yourself. Write 1 page, just one. Maybe that's 15 minutes before breakfast. Or maybe it's 20 minutes after the kids are asleep. Maybe you're writing during your lunch break with a notebook. It doesn't matter where or how. It doesn't matter if your writing feels wonderful. Just write the story. And then tomorrow, write another page. And then write another. And then at the end of 7 days, you won't just have 7 new pages. You'll have rebuilt something even more valuable. You've built momentum. Momentum is really one of the greatest gifts that a writer can have. If you'd like to join me in this commitment, leave a comment below that says 1 page today. I would love to cheer you on as you make progress on writing your novel. And if you've already written your page, please do write in the comments below, because your encouraging words might be exactly what another writer needs to hear today. I'd love to help you with your next step. I've created a completely free Sweet Romance Story Starter Pack, especially for beginning sweet romance writers. And you'll find worksheets inside that will help you to move from simply a story idea to a plot that you can begin writing your story. So if you've been staring at the blank page, wondering where to begin, I really think that you will find this helpful and enjoyable. You can download it today using the link below this video, and it's completely free. And before you go, I want to encourage you with one final thought. 1 year from today, you'll wish you had started, not because writing is easy and not because every page is perfect, but because every page brings you one step closer to holding your finished story in your hands. Your readers don't need a perfect writer, they need a faithful one. They need someone willing to show up, someone willing to keep learning, and someone willing to write one more page. And maybe, just maybe, that writer is you. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Keep believing in your story, keep believing in your characters, and most importantly, keep writing. I'll see you next time.